My husband and his mistress thought they could get away with it, because I'm blind, traveling and even making it on the trending news. But little did they know, my eyesight was restored long ago. I deliberately threw a live stream camera from my mother-in-law in the bathroom. One day, when my husband and his mistress returned to the bathroom, I quietly turned the live stream on. The chat exploded. I lost my sight due to an accident. After finally recovering, I wanted to surprise my husband, but he surprised me first. James, who was supposed to be on a business trip, suddenly appeared on travel news. He was holding hands with another girl, smiling at each other. A reporter raised a microphone and asked, "Any fun things happened on this trip?" James pinched the girl's cheek and lovingly said, "I'm here with my girlfriend, making lots of great memories." The girl, in her cozy winter outfit, looked blissfully at James with a slight curve in her eyes. Curious, the reporter turned to her, "And how about you?" The girl spoke with a touch of sadness, forcing a smile, saying, "I hope to always be with my boyfriend." James looked guilty, but suddenly said to the reporter, "I want to give Sandy a surprise. Can you be a witness?" The reporter was immediately interested and quickly agreed, "Of course." With that hopeful look in the girl's eyes, my husband suddenly kneeled, presenting a ring in a velvet box. I rubbed the ring on my finger, letting out a bitter laugh. Years ago, James didn't have much money. To spare his pride, I chose a simple silver band without a diamond. James was moved, holding my hand tightly. He promised, "Vivian, I'll make you the happiest wife in the world." Years have passed. James took over my family's business, but never thought to buy me a new ring. Yet here he was, offering a sparkling diamond to another girl, making promises. "Sandy, I'll love you forever. I hope you'll give me the chance." The tourists around them erupted, chanting, "Together, together, together." In front of everyone, the girl cried as she put on the diamond ring, then kissed James in the snowy scene. I shakily turned off my phone, tears streaming down as my heart ached. Lying curled up in bed, I couldn't suppress the heaviness in my chest, and my tears slowly soaked the pillow. When I finally awoke, I found that James had called me dozens of times. I played a voicemail. James's voice filled the room, anxious. "Vivian, why aren't you picking up? Don't do anything reckless. I'll be back soon." Listening to his urgent tone left me with a chilling feeling. Does James really care whether I live or die? I'm supposedly blind, unreachable. A sensible person would have called an ambulance, not me repeatedly. I decided to keep my regained sight a secret, and see what he would do. That night, I heard keys turning in the lock. I pretended to be the usual, feeling my way to open the door, and saw James bringing the girl home. I feigned ignorance and asked, "James, is that you?" The living room was silent. After glaring at me for a few seconds, James suddenly held me, trembling, saying, "Vivian, I called you so many times. I was scared to death when you didn't answer." I hugged his waist tight, apologizing. "I napped for a long time today. Sorry for making you worry." The girl standing nearby didn't look pleased. Touching the ring on her finger, she broke the silence. "Hello, I'm James's co-worker." I was stunned for a moment and then greeted her. James's expression shifted slightly as he forced a smile, saying, "Vivian, this is my co-worker, Sandy. She needed to use the bathroom." He shot Sandy a glare. Sandy's eyes turned red as she looked at him, full of grievances. Yet, she strutted into the master bedroom boldly, with James following her hurriedly. He whispered through gritted teeth, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" Sandy tiptoed, kissed James, and held him tight. "You're mine." James smiled helplessly, pinched her nose, and then hurriedly pushed her out. Meanwhile, I sat on the sofa the whole time, feeling like my heart was tearing apart. My soul trembled in pain, but I had to keep my face composed, not giving anything away. Sandy's tender fingers trailed down from James's chest. Despite his deep, troubled eyes, he held my hand first, cautiously guiding me back to the bedroom. "You should sleep," he whispered. "I'll see her out." Before I could reply, he rushed away. Since my blindness, my hearing became sharply sensitive. Even while lying in bed, I could still hear the sounds from next door. Around 3 or 4 in the morning, they finally quieted down. Soon after, Sandy abruptly opened the master bedroom door. I pretended to be asleep. She stood by my side, snickering, "Pathetic, even blind. You don't realize your husband brings other women home." Once she left, I clutched my chest tightly, gasping for air, trying to suppress the suffocating feeling. I wanted to scream, to cry out loud, but my voice was caught. No sound came out. My mind was crystal clear, glaring at the ceiling. How could James betray me like this and dare to bring another woman home? As dawn approached, James pulled me into his arms, kissing my brow lightly. I wanted to laugh, so I did, shaking in his embrace. James asked softly, "What's making you smile so much?" I choked back tears. I had a beautiful dream, but I forgot it. Tears poured from my eyes. James gently wiped them away with his fingers, looking pained. If it makes you cry, it probably wasn't a good dream. My mind drifted to the kind and gentle boy from years ago. Teenage James plucked a flower, climbed up to my house's wall with difficulty, and flashed a bright smile at me. "Here, for you," he said, though the flower was already a bit crushed by that point. James froze in place, his ears turning red, and he stammered, "I'll go pick another one." I shook my head and said happily, "It's perfect for a bookmark." James sighed with relief, but then lost his footing and fell off the wall. He startled me, and I rushed from the second floor into the yard, only to see him wincing and holding his butt cheek. I laughed so hard, I had to steady myself against the wall. He got mad and ran off like a rocket. Less than a minute later, he was back, thrusting a bunch of flowers into my hands. "What other colors do you like for bookmarks? I'll get them all for you." Not long after, my dad returned from a business trip, and our whole family moved to the city. We didn't see each other again until college, where we quickly fell into a passionate romance, always glued to each other. But my parents didn't approve of us being together. "I know you like the guy, but a good match in social class is what makes a stable relationship. You're worlds apart," they said. James lost his dad early and worked hard to pay for college himself. I thought back then, if he's willing to earn $3,000 and spend $2,500 on me, what is that if not true love? I cried and fought with my parents. I was determined to be with him. Then, an accident happened, and I injured my eye while trying to save James. With tears streaming down his face, James held me, his warm tears falling on my hand. He went on his knees before my parents, begging, "Please, give me a chance to take care of Vivian. If I ever betray her, let me drop dead right then." But in reality, he brought his mistress to bed right in front of his wife. Had I stayed blind, I might have lived deceived my whole life. I checked his chat records secretly while he was in the shower. "Sandy, when are you going to make your move?" "James, her dad's really sharp. If something happens to Vivian, her inheritance goes straight to charity. I'll get her to sign the transfer papers willingly." Looking at the screen, I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. At that moment, I had no more soft feelings left for James. If he intended to end things amicably, I might have been okay. But if he was going to scheme against me, he better be ready for the consequences. I backed up James's chat logs and stored them secretly. James walked out of the bathroom just then and saw me with his phone, yelling, "What are you doing?" Startled, I dropped the phone, which hit the ground with a thud. "You have a call," I said quickly, crouching to search for the phone, apologizing all the while. "James, I didn't mean to." "Don't be mad." He glanced at the phone screen and breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing me crawl on the floor, he softened a bit, feeling guilty. "Vivian, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have lost my temper." I sniffed, holding back my tears, but I shook my head maturely. "Your phone must have something important. I'm just so clumsy. Sorry for causing trouble." A trace of pain flashed in James's eyes, and he quickly wrapped me in his arms, soothingly patting my back. Then Sandy appeared, wearing his shirt that hung loosely off her, accidentally revealing marks on her skin. James narrowed his eyes, making a beeline for Sandy, and they disappeared back into the guest room. Cautiously using my cane, I found a chair and sat down. The smell of seafood porridge hit me, and I almost gagged. I've been allergic to seafood since I was a kid. A little taste and I'd break out in hives and could barely breathe. When we first started dating, James didn't know about this. To flavor the dish, he added crab powder one time. That night, I broke out, collapsing on the floor, gasping for air. James freaked out, cried as the paramedics took me away, and dropped to his knees, pleading with them. "Please save my girlfriend." A medic yelled at him for not knowing about my seafood allergy. After that ordeal, whether dining at home or outside, James kept a vigilant eye to make sure I was nowhere near seafood. Looking at the large bowl of seafood porridge, I pushed it off the table with a cold laugh. The bowl shattered, spilling the porridge everywhere, grabbing the attention of the two in the room. James rushed out, seeing the mess, and his face turned sour. "Vivian, what's with you lately? Can't you give me a break?" I just stood there, lost, a shard cutting my face and leaving welts on my exposed skin. The seafood smell made my head spin. My body broke into hives, and I quietly cried, "Sorry, sorry." James took a deep breath, suppressing his anger, and cleaned up the spilled porridge. Come on, let's go to the hospital. I shook my head nervously. No, I'm fine, really. He scooped me up in front of Sandy and hurried me to the hospital in his car. After learning I was okay, he sighed, visibly relieved. Just then, his phone started ringing. It was a sweet, upbeat love song. James froze for a moment and instinctively hung up, but whoever was calling wouldn't give up. After a few tries, James finally lost patience. Vivian, I'll be right back. Without waiting for me to reply, he walked away. I couldn't help but smile a little, thinking of James' mom back home. I needed an excuse to get her over to our place. The nurse came out holding an IV bag and looked puzzled. Where's your husband? I raised my head blankly and whispered, he'll be back soon. A couple hours passed and I just sat there on the bench in the hallway. Even the nurse couldn't stand it anymore. She snapped, what's keeping him? Did he forget his wife still in the hospital? The next moment, a deep male voice chimed in apologetically, sorry, I'm late. The man in front of me was wearing a casual suit. His sharp eyes and pale skin stood out as he sat next to me. The nurse assumed he was my husband and grumbled, if the drip finishes, call someone. The man nodded slowly, then watched as the liquid from the IV dripped down. Vivian, are you feeling any better? The man imitated James' voice when speaking to me. I played along, smiling at him. I'm a lot better. Thank you for taking me to the hospital. The man seemed a bit uneasy. He gently held my hand and kissed it lightly. I was hit with a familiar cool fragrance that stirred a storm inside me. Suddenly, memories of the dark days slipped back in. James used to be so considerate, but over time, he grew impatient. Sometimes, when we went out, he'd disappear for a while. Later, he'd return apologetically, holding my hand and kissing it. That cool scent clinging to him became unforgettable. I once teased James about wearing cologne. He denied it outright. I thought he was just shy. But now, it seemed James may not be James. Perhaps he was this other man. He knew I was married, he knew where I lived, and he used James' identity and voice to get close to me. That realization sent shivers down my spine, cold sweat trickling on my back. In the next second, the man draped his jacket over my shoulders, pulled me close, and patted my back. Feeling warmer, strangely, my panic melted away, my breathing calmed down. Amidst the bustling crowd, we embraced. The tension I'd held for so long faded, and before I knew it, I fell asleep. When I woke up, the man was gone, but his lingering scent kept me wrapped in its embrace. Miss Vivian, your husband had an emergency. He booked you a ride, the nurse said, barely hiding her disdain. Take care of yourself. Can't let yourself be foolish, she added. I chuckled and nodded, cautiously getting up. Can I borrow a cane? Here's your white cane. Be careful. The nurse handed me a light blue one. I hesitated for a second, then took it. My own cane was back at home. James left in such a hurry, he didn't remember it. But this man not only got me a cane, he even knew my favorite color. He also made sure a female driver came to pick me up from the hospital. He stayed until I got in the cab. Back at the apartment complex, I bumped into James' mom, who had come rushing over. She saw me holding the hospital's plastic bag and looked surprised. James is working overtime, right? I nodded obediently. He's been getting calls like crazy, probably busy. He better have eaten by now. Vivian, even though you're blind, you still need to take care of him. That's a woman's role, she lectured. While listening, instead of getting annoyed, I felt more excited. As she knocked on the door, she noticed the marks on James' neck and exploded. Her face fell, and she snidely remarked, my son worked all day, and he still has to cater to someone at night. James, seeing me behind his mom, turned pale. Mom, how dare you call me mom? She scolded. Look at your neck. Can you still face people? Hearing the commotion, Sandy stepped out. When James' mom noticed her marks, she got even more furious. James quickly covered her mouth, gritting his teeth. Don't say anything. Let me explain. Minutes later, she stormed out of the bedroom, glaring at Sandy. Guess these mosquitoes are pretty fierce, biting your neck like that. Sandy, eyes brimming with tears, held back in silence. Trapped in the mess, James looked exhausted. This scene was exactly what I anticipated. I brought his mother here, because she raised James on her own. She couldn't stand any woman getting too close to her son. Once I learned she bathed him and even spied on him with a camera, I blew up on her. We've gotten by on our own. Who are you to take my son? She snapped. James had to plead with her for ages before she toned it down. Now, with Sandy's audacity, and having seen those marks, James' mom was livid. After moving in, she set up hidden cameras in front of me, which could broadcast live. I thought it over, put on plastic gloves, and placed one camera in the bathroom of the guest room. One day, when she went shopping, I made an excuse to get my eyes checked at the hospital again. That man showed up once more, masquerading as a cab driver. Where to? His gravelly voice made me rub my ear out of instinct. His voice was way nicer than I imagined. Go to the hospital. He stayed silent the whole ride, dropping me off at the entrance, pretending to leave right after. I shuffled forward with my cane, stumbling here and there. That man never left my side, keeping me safe. Losing my sight was tough. I've broken down, crying out in my room. James was too busy with work to spend much time with me. I had to muster up the courage to explore the world on my own. To my surprise, it wasn't as scary as I thought, but whenever I got back to my neighborhood, I'd end up bumping into poles or people. Looking back, maybe that man was quietly watching over me, and I never even knew it. As time went on, I walked into the hospital restroom and turned on my live streaming gear. As soon as it started, an intense scene popped up. A whole lot of folks flooded into the stream, going wild in the comments. Suddenly, one odd comment stood out. Don't these two look familiar? Like that emotional guy proposing to his girlfriend in the news. The viewers all started inviting their friends to watch. Soon, the stream skyrocketed to the top 3 trending spots. People recognized them and started spreading the news. I know this guy. He's married and brought his mistress home for this. His wife is blind. It's really sad. Local cops even commented they had the couple's home address and would visit soon. Then, the stream got shut down. But lots of people recorded it and posted the video all over various sites. Seeing it was heating up, I got my follow-up report from the hospital. Then, that man rushed over. Don't go home. He seemed too nervous to fake his voice. Probably knew about James's cheating. His anxious eyes warmed my heart, but I had to see this drama through. Who are you? I acted scared, shouting, keep it up and I'm calling the cops. Seeing the disdain in my eyes, he bit his lip, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I felt torn inside, but pushed him away, taking a cab back home. Didn't even get through the entrance, when the guard gave me a sympathetic look. He patted my shoulder gently. Something happened at your place. The police are there now. I was shocked, asking urgently, was there a break-in? Are my husband and his mom hurt? The guard hesitated, unable to explain clearly. He sighed, hold on to my shoulder. You'll see what's up. Things had blown up. A crowd was gathering outside my home. Even from afar, I could hear James's mom's angry voice. Sandy, you witch! Installing cameras in the bathroom to ruin my son's reputation. Sandy's hair was a mess, face swollen from being hit. She shot back, furious. I'd have to be crazy to put a camera on myself. It was clearly you being a freak, spying on your son. James, in just his boxers, was trying to calm them down. An officer barked, enough, this is serious. You're all coming with us. I tapped my cane, asking softly, what's going on here? The crowd gave way as they saw me. James's face turned pale, but the cop spoke first. Your husband's caught distributing obscene content. We need you to come with us too. I was stunned, voice trembling. Did he sell those kinds of tapes? An old lady lost her patience. Your hubby brought his mistress home and streamed it. The whole neighborhood knows. I swayed in disbelief, tears welling, stirring sympathy from the onlookers. James rushed over, pulling me into his arms. Vivian, let me explain. You just had your mistress, and now you want your wife to forgive you. A burly guy pointed to the marks on James's skin, scoffing. Sandy was red-eyed, choking back sobs. It's the unloved who's the mistress. She just happened to take the wife's spot first. What's so great about that? Everyone was dumbstruck, and some women were visibly angry. Mistress with a right, are you serious? Broadcasting the whole thing. Disgusting. If you were my daughter, I'd drown you at birth to save others the pain. Desperate tears streamed down my face. I swung my cane at him, yelling, James, you shameless pig. He staggered back, a blood streak across his face, coughing out 2 bloody teeth. James's mom snarled, kicking me to the ground. Rebellion. How dare you hit my son? I curled up in pain, trembling all over. The crowd exploded in anger, forming a shield around me, beating James and his mom. Even the cops couldn't control them. Stop it. Keep this up, and you'll all face obstruction charges. Hearing that, they got a few more kicks in before reluctantly stopping. When the chaos died down, James was moaning in pain, clutching his leg. The officer had no choice but to rush him to the hospital where they found his leg was broken. After investigating, they discovered the mother-in-law had placed cameras all around, but she wouldn't admit to putting one in the bathroom. A cop warned sternly, broadcasting obscene material is serious. It carries a jail sentence. Panicked, the mother tried to pin it on Sandy, desperate to save her beloved son. It was definitely her plan. Arrest her instead. But the only fingerprints on the camera belonged to the mother-in-law. In the end, she took the blame for her son. She went to jail, and James and Sandy's reputations were totally ruined. James got fired from his company. They gave him a bit of severance pay and showed him the door. James was scared I'd divorce him. He even got down on one knee, with his injured leg, and begged at my feet. Vivian, I was so wrong. Can you give me another chance? Maybe because the incident got a lot of attention, and if I took him to court, I'd totally win, and he'd leave with nothing. How could I divorce you? I patted his trembling back, with a smile that said more than words. We're gonna be together forever. With the mother-in-law in jail and his name in the mud, James had nowhere to run. To save himself, he cut ties with Sandy right in front of me. But when I checked his phone, he was still messaging Sandy. Sandy, hang in there, soon that woman will be out of the picture. I acted like nothing happened and kindly hired a caretaker for James. When the caretaker wasn't looking, I added medication for osteoporosis into his bone broth. This stuff wouldn't kill him, but it would definitely delay the healing of his bones, maybe even leave some permanent side effects. My husband loves me so much, I must treat him well. James, time for your soup. The caretaker set the broth in front of James. Looking at it, he couldn't help but gag. Soup again. I gently advised, hang in there, James. Dad called to say once you're healed, he'll let you manage the rest of the family business. James's eyes lit up. Really? I nodded firmly. Of course, it was a lie. After finding out about James's cheating, my parents were furious and almost came after him. I made a special trip home to calm them down. Vivian, your eyes. Mom covered her mouth and cried, hugging me tightly. Dad had a stern look, but with red eyes, said shakily, good, good. Once they calmed down, I shared my plan. Mom worried, it's too dangerous. Just divorce him. Mom, he wanted me dead. I said calmly, he's going to pay. Dad shouted his approval, beaming at me. That's my girl. Mom nodded, eyes filled with anger. Don't worry, even if it means our lives, we won't let our daughter suffer. My heart ached, feeling remorse. I regretted being so stubborn and blind, causing my parents so much worry. They never blamed me and only wished for my happiness. As the hour grew late, I worried James would get suspicious, so I hurried back. Returning home, I noticed someone was moving into my building. In the crowded chaos, someone bumped into me. Watch your blind self, causing trouble, he grumbled. Just before I fell, a warm pair of hands caught me. Are you okay? I was stunned seeing the familiar man before me. I'm Nick, the new guy in the building. Nick lowered his gaze, fixating on me without holding back, knowing I couldn't see. His eyes held a fascination, almost like a creepy stalker. Somehow, I wasn't scared at all, like I was sort of used to it. Thanks, I'm Vivian. Hearing my voice, his eyes sparkled, and a grin crept onto his face. But there wasn't time to chat. James needed me at home. After a month of recovery, he could finally hobble around with crutches. Vivian, is my father-in-law's offer still good? Of course, I reassured him, holding his hand. Most of Dad's business was passed to James, but the most important parts were still tightly held by him. James bought some nice wines and rushed over to pledge his loyalty to my father. Looking at James's leg, my dad advised, your leg just healed, better rest a bit more. But these projects require hands-on work to build one's network. Lounging at home won't do. James thought it was a test and quickly assured my dad, I'll make sure those projects do well for you. My dad and I exchanged a knowing smile. So Dad gave James some lousy projects to handle. Daily he'd hobble to work, and come night, drink excessively at events. Such determination. What a shame, Dad mentioned to me. But cutting out the rot is how you get new growth. Not lifting my head from my work, I replied, don't worry, I've got this. Dad started guiding me on business matters. Being his child, I had inherited his business sense, but I'd placed too much faith in James. Learning now, not heeding elders leads to losses. Dad pointed out the window. And what's with that man? Nick stood in the sun like a statue. Don't worry about him. He'll pass out from heat stroke soon, and someone will take him to the hospital. Dad was about to speak, but I cut him off. Pitiful folks always have bad luck. This is a lesson I'll remember. Well, you could keep him around for fun. I jerked my gaze up, shocked to hear such words from my strict father. Inheritors are necessary. Forget it. He may look good, but he seems dumb. Risking the next generation isn't worth it. Dad seemed torn, finally sighing, suit yourself. A few days later, James slipped and tumbled down the stairs. With all the osteoporosis meds he'd taken, his bones were fragile, barely tougher than hardtack. This time it wasn't just the leg. His rib broke and stabbed into his lung, almost costing him his life on the spot. He barely pulled through, but now he's left with a lifetime of asthma. And my father took back his business, as if it was the most natural thing. Why did Dad do this to me? James lay in bed, screaming hoarsely, his face flushed, and breathing heavily. I tried to comfort him, saying, your father's doing it for you. You should focus on getting better now. You, blind bat, wandering around is just pissing me off. James picked up the water cup from beside the table and hurled it at me. The cup missed me, but the shards scattered everywhere, cutting into my skin. I pretended to be startled and couldn't help but let out a yelp. The door to the ward suddenly burst open, and the next moment, Nick had me in his arms. He gently touched my face, his eyes rimmed with red, and said hoarsely, "You're hurt." James seemed to realize something, his face twisted in anger, dark as night. "Vivian, you found another man behind my back." Leaning against Nick, I chuckled lightly, "Hey, look down." Nick obediently bent over slightly, and I grabbed his chin and kissed him. I licked the corner of my mouth, teasing, "Sweet." Nick looked a little stunned, a blush creeping up his fair skin, his breath quickening. "Oh, this is your divorce certificate." I took a small red booklet from my pocket and tossed it at James' face. "Stuff like this can be handled easily without even needing the other person's consent." James was so mad he shook all over, his eyes rolled back, and he was wheeled back into the ER. Nick was trembling, eyes filled with desire, said shakily, "Vivian, I want to kiss you. I want to kiss you." Before I could reply, he eagerly pressed his lips to mine. It was just lips touching, but he immediately stopped moving. A few seconds later, he reluctantly pulled away. Nick's eyes were watery, watching me quietly, like he wanted to remember me forever. I felt a bit soft-hearted, though my face stayed calm. "When did you know my eyesight was back?" "I knew from the beginning." Nick bit his lip. "I'm sorry. I couldn't control myself. Thank you for not being afraid of me." From his jumbled words, I understood what he meant. He knew stalking was wrong, but couldn't help it. "I know it's been you by my side all this time." Suddenly, I burst into laughter. "You have a nice fragrance." Nick, however, shook his head. "I'm not wearing any perfume." I leaned closer to sniff his neck. The cool, fresh scent wrapped around me, and suddenly it hit me. "It's your natural scent. I like it." Nick blushed instantly, jumped up, and dashed out in a hurry. I was stunned for a moment, then burst out laughing, holding my stomach. When James came out of the ER, the doctor somberly said, "Prepare yourselves mentally." "Did he die?" I asked, unable to hide a bit of cheerfulness in my voice. "Brain hemorrhage. There's a high chance he's paralyzed." Sure enough, when James woke up, half his body couldn't move. He couldn't speak, his eyes stared at me full of malice, making wheezing noises. "Nick, feed me." I just sat casually on Nick's lap. He leaned in and kissed the corner of my mouth. "You got something there." James looked like his eyes would pop out, forced to watch our affection. The worst thing for a paralyzed patient is extreme mood swings, and he fainted several times a day. Soon, he couldn't move his whole body. After thinking about it for a while, I finally decided to pack up James and sent him to Sandy. Later, my father handed over his entire business for me to manage. It was hectic, but once I got the hang of it, I suddenly thought about James and Sandy. The two of them together should be happy, right? I had someone look into their situation, but the outcome was surprising. James seemed to be abused by Sandy. No one helped him move, so he developed bed sores. His whole body was ulcerating and foul-smelling. Sandy let him wail in agony on the bed, living every day in filth. The stench in the house was unbearable. She couldn't take it anymore and slammed the door, leaving. A few days later, James starved to death. The neighbor next door, a medical examiner, smelled the odor of a corpse and immediately reported it to the local police station. The police broke into the house and found his body starting to decompose. They arrested Sandy immediately, charged with willful neglect leading to death. She ended up in prison, probably not getting out for at least a decade. My former mother-in-law, just released from prison, fainted again upon hearing about her son's death. After waking up, she had a stroke too. I truly thank my lucky stars for getting out of that hellhole. Otherwise, those bad genes would have been the end of my kids. Nick sat next to me, reading a prenatal book word by word. The sunlight bathed the man, giving off a soft, glowing light. I gently touched my slightly rounded belly, unable to hold back my smile.